In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some of the current conditions around the globe regarding the sea surface temperatures as it pertains to the upcoming, ongoing fall and upcoming winter of 2025-2026. We will also be taking a huge look at some climate models and other long-range models, looking into, again, the fall months, but primarily talking about the winter months for this upcoming winter, what they're thinking temperature and precipitation wise. Obviously, I've been uploading the winter forecast and snowfall forecast that you guys can check out on the channel, but I wanted to get into the raw data today and just show you guys what is going on. So first off, we're looking at the sea surface temperatures. I feel like this is appropriate. We're going to be looking at the current before we kind of dive into the model guidance, so we can kind of get a good foundation of what to expect based on what we see. Two main features here is a weak La Nina that is expected to hover around what we call a neutral ENSO to perhaps a weak La Nina. We're leaning towards the peak of these cool temperatures in what we call the ENSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation region here, which I have circled. We're leaning towards these kind of being the peak cold around now into October, and then kind of gradually warming a little bit and lifting off into more, again, neutral territory by the time we reach the winter months. To be transparent, the best outcome for cold and snow would be that neutral ENSO, although for areas further south, like the deep south, into the Carolinas and Virginia, for some reason, weak La Ninas tend to be the best of the best as far as winters in my neck of the woods. Personally, last year we saw a lot of snow here, some of the most snow I've ever seen in my local area, and we were in a weak La Nina. So really, either of these two outcomes would be pretty good for cold and snow. Again, neutral and so probably the best looking at the central and eastern states as a whole. Another feature that we have going for us is this really warm column of air and water. The water is influencing the air, and that's why we kind of have a warm both for a majority of the time. But the water is certainly warm here south of Alaska, west of the west coast of Canada, and the west coast of the United States here. And that is a really strong signal for a ridge to set up over this area throughout the fall and winter months. And oftentimes when we see that happen, this forces a lot of the colder air into the central and eastern states. And if we see that effect really take hold, we could see something similar to the winters that we saw in like 2013 and 2014. Winters like that feature very warm waters in these areas. That plays a really big role. So again, the two main features is this warm blob there, and then the overall cooler ENSO region that is, again, somewhere between neutral ENSO and very weak La Nina. This is a pretty hefty lineup that we have going here, guys, to be honest. The only improvement that I could see in the Pacific is some cooling in this area. If we kind of just end up seeing an overall warmer North Pacific like we have now, we could risk seeing warmer air overall just kind of flow straight through the entire United States, which would be a lot of times warmer from coast to coast. I am leaning towards, because of the intensity of the warmth right here, there primarily being a ridge set up above that area, and then trough into, again, the central and eastern states. But we do run the risk, especially if the central North Pacific areas stay warmer like this, sometimes seeing the warm air kind of just travel across all of North America. That is something that I do have in the back of my mind. Looking at some of the forecasts for this ENSO region real quickly, this is a probability one. So we see the percentages on the left, the months on the bottom. So DJF is what we're looking for winter. That is December, January, February timeframe. And we can see that the top probability there is the gray, which is neutral ENSO. The second highest is a La Nina. Again, in this case, would likely, very likely be a weak La Nina if that did occur. And then very low potential for El Nino. So that is the current forecast here from some of these models. Here's the kind of more spaghetti type chart where we can see each individual model. On this one, it's a little different. This is the threshold sort of for El Nino status. It does have to stay above or below these statuses for a certain amount of time to officially be considered an El Nino or La Nina. The bottom one is La Nina, the top one is El Nino. Again, at the bottom we have the months, so DJF for winter, SON, September, October, November for fall. And you can see, again, the coolest of the coolest kind of peaks here at some point between like October, November, maybe December timeframe, where we could trickle into weak La Nina status. But the majority of these are going to stay within that neutral ENSO status. We have many different models, and the mean averages are following these thicker lines here. And you can see they come very close, but they stay kind of in this territory right around the cooler side neutral ENSO. Now that we have all that stuff out of the way that might bore some of you, let's just get into some of the model guidance here. And this is going to be the month-by-month temperature anomalies from your CFS monthly model. This is September, or I guess what remains of September. We do expect to finish off on a warmer note for the central and eastern states, a little cooler along the west. I do agree with this. As we move forward to October, things get interesting on this model. Again, you have so much warm water here south of Alaska, west of the west coasts of Canada and the United States. And that does tend to just kind of travel onshore. We know most of the time the winds are generally moving from west to east, so that effect is being brought onshore, which does create this kind of ridging effect. And we do get that trough in the east look here for the October outlook from the CFS model. Something to be excited about. Just the month following this month, obviously. So right around the corner. As we keep going towards November, we do thaw out a little bit. We do see some cooler air around for areas of Alaska and Western Canada, which is typically associated with a milder United States as a whole in these fall and winter months. We can see some cooler conditions for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, some slightly above normal for the rest of the areas in the east. Not the most ideal look for cold and snow. Obviously, by December, things look even less optimistic. It's like, what is going on? We have cooler than normal conditions all along the west coast. Total negative P&A pattern, which all that means is cold along the west. And we really see, as a result, warmer air trend in for the eastern states. Now, keep watching because January comes along and we totally flip the script. That warm column of water totally impacts all of the air in the surrounding land masses here. As you can see, Alaska, western Mexico, western United States, western Canada, all of these areas are warm. And this forces all of that Arctic air that would have been in those areas to get squeezed down into areas in the central and eastern states. And this particularly looks good because we also have warmer air around for northern Canada and into Greenland. We call that Greenland blocking. And that would just really bode well for this severe cold air just diving into these central and eastern locations, and also probably set up a pretty nice potential for a storm track up the east coast, bringing some areas snowfall. As we keep going towards well, we skipped a month there. Let's go back to February. Not as interesting and as optimistic as January, but we still have an overall warmer west, so a ridge set up in this area, and we overall have cooler temperatures moving into the central and eastern states. It's less intense, but it is still the case here on this CFS model for the February of 2026. March, things back off towards the west and central states more so, but we still have some cooler conditions along the east coast. I don't think that would be too much of a problem. And then obviously beyond March, we stop talking about snow. It does look cold on this model from April into June, but not really winter months anymore. We're mostly moving into the spring and summer, and quite frankly, usually around this time of year, April, May, June, personally, I prefer it to be warmer than normal, so this is a little bit of bad news to me. As we take a look at the entirety of September, October, November, or what we were talking about earlier, SON timeframe, we could see an overall look with a ridge present a majority of the time along the western areas of North America there, and some cooler air able to make its way into the central and eastern states as a whole for that entire 3-month period. The coolest area being around the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. I know a lot of you guys live in those regions. Looking at the DJF, December, January, February timeframe, it is very similar. We see overall warmer conditions along the west, again, with the exception of December here in this case. A clear, just line of cold air moving most of the time into the central states and into the eastern states at time. There is a little bit of a southeast ridge present throughout this upcoming winter on these models at times, which for those of you in these areas isn't that bad of news. This could indicate that a storm track moving through these areas might be likely, which would put a lot of these areas in prime position to receive some snowfall, which I know you guys have been itching for years now. Precipitation-wise, things get a little bit messier, and quite frankly, I believe that climate models and long-range models as a whole struggle with precipitation more than temperature. We can see for September the obvious, kind of what we've already been talking about for weeks now. October 2025, we see some similar things to my fall and winter outlooks here. We see wetter conditions throughout the Northwest a little bit, Midwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Great Lakes kind of being a hot spot as well. Much drier for the Southwest, South Central, and Southeastern states as a whole. November features a wetter West and Central states with a much drier Northeast all the way down to Florida here. December, things get interesting. Remember, it's warmer in the East on this model. We do see a wetter Southwest, which I just have to disagree with as a whole for really any winter month this upcoming winter. I would be actually quite surprised if we saw that for the majority of any December, January, February here coming up. I do agree with these areas being pretty well above average. I think that's going to be the case. As we move towards January, we get drier along the east, wetter along the west. I think February is actually the month that looks the most similar to what I'm thinking, with a wetter northwest, drier southwest, wetter kind of upper Midwest and Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast. It's not that severe compared to normal, but it is present. The main disagreement here would be the severely above average precipitation deep south and southeast area, which is more reminiscent of an El Nino. I think it's certainly possible, more possible than a lot of these areas in the southwest being wetter. But again, not we don't have any really strong indicators at this point to suggest something along these lines, really. Looking towards March as well, we get a pretty similar look. The west gets kind of just shut down as a whole. Wetter plains, Midwest, deep south here, even up into a lot of the eastern states, quite wet. As we take a look at the 3-month periods for this precipitation as well, September, October, November here, much drier in the southeast, much wetter in the northwest in particular, into a lot of the central states. For the winter, again, a wetter west as a whole. Typically, during the wintertime, it's extremely rare to see the northwest and southwest very wet. Typically, you're seeing one or the other. So I have my doubts about this for sure. I do agree wholeheartedly with pretty much everything on the northern half of this, except I think the northeast will probably get some above average precipitation as well, but I have to disagree with almost everything in the southern states here as a whole. Just to kind of give you guys a little bit more info, here's another model. This is the CANSIPS. Now, this model is not particularly known for being super good. I'm just going to show it for fun here. And of course, every model should be considered a possibility at least. So we're going to kind of diversify our outlook here a little bit and get another opinion. CANSIPS, September, shows the rest being cold. Well, actually, this outlook came out on August 31st. So I will say this is actually a good outlook. It's the majority of what we saw throughout, early and mid-September. I would say at least till the 10th. 1st through 10th of September did look this way. We're obviously flipping now. October, if I can get it to load, there we go, does look quite similar with that warmer water again influencing the air out there. Cooler in a lot of the central and eastern states, especially the further inland you go for some of these Midwest and plains locations. November. Now, there's not a lot of blue in the east, but this is a strong, really healthy looking signal out west for cooler temperatures to head into the east. And we do have neutral to slightly below normal temperatures here on this model. I suspect that if the west looked that way, the east could be cooler than what this is showing, but still a promising look. Then as we move into December, we see something interesting start to take place. We have this warmer air that isn't just along the west, it's actually spreading to a lot of the southeast and deep south here, which is interesting, not unheard of, but interesting to say the least. And we actually have cooler than normal conditions, mostly for the north central and northeastern states here for December 2025 on this CANSIPS model. January is quite similar with a cooler north compared to normal and a warmer south compared to normal. Higher contrast than typical between these two areas. Very interesting. And February is very, very similar. Even March is quite similar. So obviously when a model is showing something continuously for 4 months in a row, you do kind of raise some question marks for sure. Definitely interesting to say the least. Looking at the precipitation here, September looks pretty good. October, Northwest looks quite wet. Also a lot of the east, with the exception of the Gulf Coast and Southeast. I could see something like this kind of playing out. November, we sort of get into something more similar to what the CFS model showed. Wetter in the Southwest, drier in the Northwest. Very odd for a weak La Nina. Drier in the Midwest and Ohio Valley as well is very, very odd for a weak La Nina neutral ENSO pattern. We actually look to see storms maybe moving along the deep south and then offshore of the mid-Atlantic and northeast for November. December here, drier across the board. January, the deep south and west is quite dry. And then February here looks very realistic to me. Dry west, dry southeast with a wetter northern areas. I think this is, again, aligns really well with what we're actually seeing. I think the northwest would be a little wetter here probably, but not a lot of corrections I would make. Of course, it's a model, so it doesn't really matter what I think. It's just the model. And then March actually kind of continues suit quite nicely, looks quite similar. So just wanted to give you guys an update on a lot of the data that we're seeing for the upcoming winter. I know you guys are eating up the winter content as you always do, so wanted to update you guys on the current model guidance, the current data that we're seeing as far as sea surface temperatures and conditions around the world that pertain to the winter. Let me know if you want more updates like this for the upcoming winter, and I will see you guys in the next video.